All right, everybody. I am really excited for today's interview. I've got a longtime client and dear friend of mine, Joseph Gatti, and welcome, Joe.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time too, Mark.
Awesome, man. So, first things first, let's go ahead and kick it off. Why don't you let everybody know where are you located?
So I'm in Danville, California. That's where my Compass office is at. And we're in the sweet spot of about basically 45 minutes from San Francisco and then 45 minutes from Silicon Valley. So it's a nice little bedroom community in the East Bay of California.
Okay. East Bay of California, Danville, beautiful area. And yeah, quite the hub between San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And before we get into any of the business, talk, I would love to hear a little bit more about you. So, where are you from originally? And just tell us a little bit more about you growing up and some of the backstory.
So local, very local. I was born in Walnut Creek, which is about basically like 5 minutes away from Danville. I grew up in Danville. I didn't spend all my time after high school. I went to UC Davis, and then I ended up going. I spent 4 years abroad, graduate school, and so I went to. I actually speak Italian. I lived in Italy for 2 years to the Università per Stranieri di Perugia, near where my relatives were still in Italy. I stayed 2 years there, and then I went to Scotland for 2 years, and then I came back to the United States around 2011ish, and I got into real estate pretty much right after that.
Okay. So, bilingual, fluent in Italian, 2 years in Italy, 2 years in Scotland. And even before that, just how was life growing up? I mean, I believe your family is pretty generational out there in the Danville area. Am I not
So
mistaken?
definitely, my grandfather came from Italy, um, and he basically found himself in Walnut Creek pretty much in 1938, 1939. And so my family, he fought in World War II for the United States after coming from Italy. And then he resettled over here basically 1950. And so my father was born in Martinez, which is like, so that was the closest hospital back then. Walnut Creek is now. And uh, basically the family has been here since 1950. And growing up wise, Danville was smaller. The hub, there was more, let's say, working in the cities. Like basically after COVID, we had the situation of the work from home, and that's made the area much more, just many more people than it was when I was growing up. But still, same kind of vibe. It's basically a great place to raise a family. Wonderful schools, very safe. It's been ranked number one for being safe in California many years in a row. And obviously it depends on what kind of scale that is, but it's a very great community in the East Bay of California.
Fantastic. So 2011, you come back, and then how did you get into real estate sales?
Well, so on on the family side of it, so I was in academia. And so I was, professor. I love to learn. That's something that we talk about a lot. And that's something, if you're a real estate professional, when you get in, a lot of people don't realize how much you will have to learn in different
Mhm.
areas and different facets. But I was, my mother got sick and I took care of her. And I was in the situation where my family's like, this is the financial crisis, it's kind of the end of it. It started picking up in 2012. And I was like, okay, I'm been in academia. This is something where I need to choose kind of a bridge of going back and going into something and being a professor or helping my family out. And I decided to go into real estate to basically, there's a generational business for my family in Danville. And so I decided to enter real estate, and I've been in ever since.
Fantastic. So did you have a mentor or guide when you started? I mean, you say generational business. Was that via the
Well,
family?
so definitely. Like since growing up, I've basically real estate has been a part of my family. My father started his real estate career about 6 years before I was born. And so he's been a real estate professional ever since. And just growing up, the verbiage, the language, the knowing what things are, sitting in a car coming from a baseball game and people asking, there's that house on the corner that your dad has. Is that going to go for this? And, they're talking to like a 10 and 12-year-old. And so the language has always been there. And I have stories like that throughout, like being a catcher and hearing people be like, oh, his dad's the real estate guy. And so, now people talk about me in that way, but it's always been a part of my life. First just hearing everything with the family and just knowing the logistics of it, and then actually doing it as a profession.
And so much has changed in the real estate industry over the last 30, 40 years. I mean, going from print book to digital to now artificial intelligence and everything else. So, on that note, how would you say you've modernized your business from when you first started?
So, it was funny about that is when I started, like putting your signpost in the yard and then the open house signs. You made it, that's the business in the sense of do that consistently and you're going to have a career. And how I would say that is, before that, you didn't have to change as much. You could keep the same kind of cycle of things. I'm sure stuff changed, but like we're in a economy now, we're in a tech world now where things are changing very quickly. And so there has to be a looking over the business and trying to work on the business on how you market. It's not enough to have open house signs and for sale signs. There's different ways of reaching people. And so the digitized element of this, of where your dollars and your time is spent on what's going to be the most productive way to reach people, um, and reach them where they're at. And so there's a constant evaluation of that.
Yeah, it's whether it be communication or marketing or, facilitation of transactions with clients, just, things have really sped up, it seems. And, that modernization curve, I feel like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, things went into overdrive where at this point, there's so much information, so much data that's available. But to your point, it's no longer clients see a sign in the yard.
Yeah.
And especially somewhere like the East Bay of California, so many international clients, so many interstate clients, so many folks that just might show up or might take a look at the marketing or you might communicate with that aren't even located anywhere locally, and so the ability to lean into that is absolutely fantastic. And I would like to talk more now about your business itself. What does your current business structure look like?
Well, so, structurally, we have a very localized business where I've grown up in the area. There's a legacy business with my father that's been for almost 50 years. Um, we have a team of where I'm the principal. My father has such a name where both of us have been doing it together for 13, 14 years now. And we have a buyer's agent. And a lot of it is a referral. But then where I came in, entering the business in 2011, was basically branching out, like you're saying, where the Bay Area economy is so dynamic. You have people changing houses, changing jobs on a more frequent basis, and it's reaching them in a level where we have new business coming in that's added on to the more legacy referral based business.
I love that. What's the average price point out there? And I know a lot of folks hear a lot of things about California, the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. So what's the average price point like?
So, so I'll give you an example of that. When there's a national headline and it's like the average price is 400 and something $1,000, that's really barely a down payment. Well, that's a down payment for a more average home in kind of the East Bay or the Bay Area. Um, and one example is, so I'm in Contra Costa County. That's where my office is at for Danville with Compass. And Danville, Alamo, and Santa Mona is kind of like our little hub areas. And those are probably the highest cost areas in Contra Costa. Um, for let's say the bread and butter price, I would say is between like 1.5 and 2. And right now, with the last couple of years, it's been 2 million to 2.5. But, it could be between 1.5 and 3 million is a more consistent. And our market in the sense of luxury will go up to, you know, 3, 4, 5 million. There are some that get to the 14 million and up, but I would say the 2 million mark is kind of the bread and butter price for basically the neighborhoods around Danville.
And when you say bread and butter price, do you mean your typical, I don't want to say starter home, but more or less your single family homes, the average in that area?
I would say single family. When I use that term, I'm more speaking of like, the it's going to be an experienced buyer who's looking for, it might not be their first home. It's going to
Mhm.
be their second one that they're going to raise children in, or they're going to be in there for 20 years, or that's their hope, or that's the talk. The average time is probably 7 years to 9 years. And
Right.
so, but this is where, have enough square footage where, you could take care of family if you needed to. You have another child if you wanted to. There's a lot of single story homes in our area that get a lot of attention because you have, boomers and young professionals competing for the same properties.
Gotcha. So when you take a look at, the last, 14 years, we'll say that you've been in the industry, what's fueled business growth the most out there? There's a lot of different dynamics and, a lot of other things. And as you mentioned, your father had a legacy business, a lot of put the sign in the yard. Demographics changed, technology changed, a lot of different things have changed. What do you feel has fueled the business growth the most?
For us, it's a combination of, like, I love economics and I love seeing, the geopolitical, the economic, and then California and the East Bay specifically is a microeconomy. And a bit of it is knowing where to market and, who is looking to live in this area. And when I say that, it's like, the jobs that are available, what's shifting, and so on. Post COVID, we saw an influx of professionals who could work from home. And so when I was growing up, this was a little too far for, commuting on a daily basis to SF or
Right.
to Silicon Valley. Now that's changed where this area has become basically, it's even past Danville, where it's now like the more fringe area of the overall San Francisco Bay Area. So when you think of SF Bay Area, we're literally on the east side of it. And what fueled for us is the, the marketing of putting your sign out, the sweat equity. There was also a level of getting to like smart equity, or where we're actually um, looking into things, digitizing things that are reaching people in a new way that is number based. And
Right.
it takes time for that. And the thing is, it constantly changes. And so a lot of it is analyzing what's going to be worth it in the next 2 years versus
Mhm.
what might be a fad that might get, taken over by something else in the sense of a way to reach future clients.
It's such a good point. Given my sales career, especially when I was in San Francisco, and my client base were a lot of tech executives, venture capital, and it's just a very data centric type of market. And that's something that you've excelled at. And in fact, you've got an article that you publish, and you're well known for being a source of really solid, concrete information. Yes, there's plenty of experience and insight to back it up, but there's a lot of fact, and in this industry, as we've seen, there's a lot of opinion. But what I know that your clients really love about you is even though there's no crystal ball, you're very solid when it comes to the facts and the data. Now, that being said, what would you say are your biggest sources of business these days?
So, I have a referral base of just friends that I know. That's more of like there's an element of, we have a big listing kind of portfolio where people know us just in the neighborhoods. We have, geographical farms where we've been doing stuff for years. And we change that up. I mean, that could be print ad, which you and I have talked extensively about. And then there's digitized. So there's old media, new media. One of the things I wanted to add though is that, like, with the digitization, the real estate business of client and the professional is still the same as it was 30, 40 years ago, is where it's a trust business. And so with writing the article, people see the data, but then they also see you in the neighborhoods. They come to your open houses and they talk to you. They ask you the specific questions. And that accessibility is very important for kind of the region that I'm in and the neighborhoods that we serve.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a large listing portfolio. Would you say you primarily focus on listings, buyers, both? And has that shifted and evolved over time?
So I would say it's evolved and it depends on the market. With the team that we have, so legacy business with my father, myself having grown up here, we have a buyer's agent with Julie. And a little bit of this is the local. We've always focused on listings because growing up, and like one of the first things I heard when I started was like, you have to list to exist. And so
Right.
that's the sign. That's the stuff putting out neighborhoods, and we do all that. And that's very much part of our game plan. For buyers, it's referral via my time spent in the area. And then it's also when people come in and they're like, hey, you're the professional in the neighborhood. What's your specific opinion of this? How should I strategically go for these? And so that tends to be the clients that I get with trying to be a knowledge-based professional for people to help them when I can. And another thing I learned when I first began was like sometimes you're going to help people and you're going to close the transaction and you'll get paid for it. But sometimes you're going to help them and they'll never buy anything, but you're helping people with the most important decision that a lot of them are going to make in their entire life.
That's right. Yeah, I remember I was told by a mentor about 15 years ago, I always struggle with self-promotion and putting myself out there. And, he looked at me and he said, Mark, I understand, but I want you to realize that every client you work with protects them from a bad situation, a bad outcome, a bad agent. So you're being of service and helping them. They need to know who you are. And I never forget, it made it a lot easier for me to understand that I care so much about my clients and always function with integrity that it's absolutely critical. So to your point, it's not about the money. It's never been about the money. In fact, those who make it about the money have pretty short-lived careers because the reputations fall apart. But when you make it about being of service and being helpful, it's a completely different ballgame. So Joe, we've been coaching together for a few years now. How do you feel that coaching has helped benefit your business or mindset over time?
So, Mark, what I would say is anybody who's done real estate for a period of time, you're in the business, you're working the transactions, and things fall to the side and you have blind spots, like somebody driving a car. You know,
Right.
you have what's behind you, you have to the immediate left or right, but there's a space where you're missing things. And I would say the most important for me is with coaching with you has been the understanding of, there are things that are going to be talked about when we have discussions that I might be missing. And then also what's, nationally, like what are trends or things that might not necessarily be in my market that I could be aware of, and like we could have genuine real estate like analytical discussions about what it could do for the bottom line in the sense of making the business better. Because there's going to be a lot of people who you know we talk to who are colleagues and whatnot, and they've spent years doing the same thing. And as time goes, things dwindle. And then by the time they catch that their stuff's not working, it's a little bit too late and it's going to be very hard for them to recover.
That level of, I don't want to say stubborn, but evolve or die. It's one of the greatest books. And there were some changes I made career wise in the past. I remember when I had left one brokerage to another, and I was asked by the CEO, why would you leave? And I said, unfortunately, this brokerage is not evolving, and it's either evolve or die at all times. And the world moves fast, technology moves fast, trends change fast, right? And so, staying on top of that is critical, but the ability to evolve and the ability to be coachable One of the reasons I've watched you succeed and continue growing is being coachable, being willing to detach and take a step back and look at the business as a business. So many folks in real estate, they don't treat their businesses like a business. They treat it like it's a transaction as it comes and goes. But as we know, at the highest levels with affluent clients, when you systematize and you plan and you track and strategize, that's when the success becomes very consistent. Now, in terms of trends, what trends are you seeing in the local market right now?
So we had years of low inventory. So just not that many houses on the market. And so prices would you'd have a price point, one property would go for X amount over, the next month another would go, and it'd be this cycle for years. In the last 6 months or so, inventory has really popped in our area. And so we're seeing a lot of that where the current volatility in the markets, um, whether that be with people's jobs, being that this is such a high kind of price point, with 2 million, 1.5 kind of being a good base, and then 2.5 being a larger kind of 4 bedroom property in Danville. You need two earners for that. And with I'm seeing a lot of people kind of slow down if there's any kind of issue with, let's say, one of the uh, the people buying the home, their job is might be threatened or whatnot. And so we're seeing a little bit more of that where after COVID, it was people, things are good. Let's move to where we want to go. Let's have a bigger house because we're going to be likely in it for longer. And we'll see how the trend goes, whether there's going to be more moving towards the urban hubs because companies are asking people to go back to the office.
That's right. That being said, you've been in the game a while and you've seen business ebb and flow up and down. How's business been this year compared to last year, would you say?
So I would say it's been similar. It's not as 2020, 21, 22. Once we had the interest rates starting to get raised, that then slowed a lot down, and it's been pretty similar in that element of it, where the clip of properties being sold are similar year wise. So I would say 2022 on has been similar versus 2022 was gangbusters. Um, but last year to this year, it's consistent. We're good with more properties coming on. There's going to be more opportunities for both sellers and buyers. And if interest rates go down, if I see that 5.99, look for the next year after that to be a very busy year.
So speaking of forward thinking, and especially with things that are evolving, and you do a lot in the luxury space, and as you mentioned, just a lot from the economical standpoint, a lot of pivots and changes, companies bringing folks back in. What's the long-term vision for you and your business?
So, one of my things with real estate is there's so many opportunities and avenues. I just love every aspect of even, the numbers, just seeing where the local market is versus last year, where the price point's at. I mean, you really have to get into where, lending, escrow, and real estate come together. For the future of the business, my area is heading more towards the luxury level. And if the schools stay as good as they've been, and then the safety levels are as good as they are, you're just going to have people looking to live here. And commute wise, if there's a level where people are even 3 days a week at the office, they'll commute to that and then come back to have Thursday, Friday, and then the weekend kind of in Danville, Allen of San Ramon. And so I'm seeing the homes that are being, there's no more homes really in the area, or at least in Danville to build. So when you have a fixer go on the market, that's getting knocked down and that's getting built. So I'm seeing this area kind of change in that way from the ranchers going to little mansions, and just a scale of young professionals coming over here to basically raise their family, or people who grew up here then coming back and they have family already nearby.
What's been really exciting also to watch is you do this fantastic job of, let's say, luxury meets innovation, where, so many of the luxury agents in the past were operating off of older systems, the older way of doing business, and watching you continue to iterate and modernize with that innovation. So I think that's something really exciting from where I sit. And I know that's been very compelling for a lot of your clients. And I'm excited to see where that goes because I know you're onto something really big. Now,
And
all of that being, go
we're in a
ahead.
world now that really, you're like when I played football, it's like keep your head on a swivel. And
Mhm.
so the idea is things are going to constantly change. And what we're trying to provide for clients at that luxury level is you're going to get the state of the art, but also the best things to give you the best price for your property. And knowing that we're constantly looking to better your situation, and it's not basically a stale process. It's been done, and I'm on to the next one or anything like that. You're an individual client that's getting specific and detailed service.
It's curated,
Definitely.
you know?
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's where the future of real estate is really going. And I mean, there's a lot of industries, especially like the Bay Area, where I mean, we could just look at what's going on now with AI and whatnot, and that you look at the internet's changing because AI is changing how people search. And so it's just there's going to be ways where the buyers, the demographics for a specific type of home are going to be found. And we're trying to provide our clients with that understanding that they could rest assured that we're lifting every rock, looking in every area so that their property looks the best to as many people as possible.
Yeah. I get asked all the time if I think AI is going to replace the real estate advisor. I do not see that happening. What I see is the real estate advisor becomes so empowered to do so much more and create the ultimate client experience being powered by AI. It's leveraging some of these advancements, but there's always the fear, this threat that it's going to replace. And I just don't see that to actually be the case. But Joe, so, we've talked about quite a bit. What are some of the biggest challenges you're navigating right now? We'll say whether it's in business, mindset, a lot of folks who watch this, there's always, I mean, everybody's dealing with challenges all the time. Life can be lifey, as I say. So what are some of the challenges that you are navigating?
Well, so for real estate, one of the things that has always been, important that I remember when I started, and somebody close to me kind of mentioned it, is when it gets slower, rest. And so that's one of the things where real estate professionals are go, go, go. And when it is busy and exciting and ready to go, you go. But to be prepared to take care of yourself, have that balance of life with how you do it. And we're getting to a place where when I first started, there was still a lot of individual agents. Individual agents are great, and there's a lot in my office. But even those individual agents have like a VA, or they're going to have an escrow officer that they always work with, which is basically de facto another team member. They'll have a transaction coordinator usually. So the business is becoming, I don't want to use the word corporate because it has so many connotations within our culture, but it's becoming where you're going to have some type of team structure for any business to be able to serve your clients the best you can. And a lot of that is determining when you and I first started, I would always talk about there's platforms that you need to be on to be seen. And there's certain things you need to provide your clients to provide them the best service. And that's why I like Compass as well, is because we're at the state of the art time to do that. But we're always constantly reevaluating what needs to be in our system for our client. But a lot of the time, there's so much stuff out there. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And so you have to evaluate. You have to evaluate it, and then uh, you're going to pick the things that are within your ability to provide.
Yeah, when things slow down, yeah, I'll tell you from a coaching perspective, if you look at a sports team, if you look at a military unit, you practice, you prepare, you go in, you succeed, you accomplish the mission, and then you need to take a break. but you also take a break to regroup, to debrief, to, replenish any supplies, to plan things out, to iterate, to learn. And it's one of the biggest things I find that, in real estate, when things slow down, a lot of fear creeps in. And instead, it would be so beneficial if so many of the agents realize this is the perfect opportunity to take a look at the systems, the marketing, the accounting, the support, or just taking a break, right? And not being on all the time, where, of course, you want to be responsive to your clients and showings and open houses. I mean, it's one of the most demanding and stressful career choices. However, that's been one of the hardest, I always share that, but that fear creeps in for so many. The minute things slow down and I hear, well, my pipeline, or I don't know where the next deal is coming from, but 20, 30, 40 years in industry, incredibly storied careers. And yet, if things slow down, the fear can creep back in. And so, doing a lot of work on that is critical. So what would you say, if there is any one habit or a mindset shift or a strategy that's made the biggest difference for you as you've been in this industry?
Was a bit of it's the rest part. What I will say is like a lot of people who get into real estate, they don't realize how difficult it is. Because in essence, you're basically a real estate professional. You're going to know everything about the lending side, and then you're going to know everything about the escrow side. And then you're going to be basically the coach, per se, for those three to work together to get a transaction to close. What you were kind of talking about, like I heard a lot when I got into the business. Oh, we closed our last escrow. We're out of business. And so a lot of the older agents, well, I don't want to say older agents, I'm talking about my father, and this is in a nice way, but it's a motivation tactic. It's basically like we need to get out there, we need to talk to people, we need to see how we could help others. And so there's that, it's a hard business. The true commission-based business is not an easy thing. And so that's something that a lot of people, when they're watching TV, watching Netflix and things like that, like the beauty of the homes, the dressing up and being professional. But there's a lot of backstory to getting that appointment and having that listing up there that is unseen. And so the professionalism that we do, and what you were kind of saying of like AI is not taking over that. There's a there's a trust element to this,
That's
and
right.
a personable, where you're managing people's expectations in a way that keeps their stress levels down. Because if you can't manage it in that right way, then people, they won't be able to do the transaction. And so there's a lot of hats in real estate. And that's what I would say is, once I got to the level where I understood that, and it takes a long time. It's not,
Right.
it's a, somebody once told me it was a time and title business. You have to spend the time, and then you get a title. And so I'm a broker, in the sense of like when, real estate agent, realtor, and so on. But I took my broker's license, and I'm proud of that. And a lot of it is knowing every aspect of how, or trying to, you can't, perfectionism. We could talk about that also, as well as being a perfectionism in this business is not something to do. And that's what you've helped me with. Like there's an element of pushing. And so for somebody who's starting out and doing this, if they think they have to be perfect, that's usually an excuse of getting things out there.
Yeah, the perfectionism um, is crippling. The paralysis by analysis. And I've watched many an agent who will take a month to sit and look at a postcard to make it just right. And I don't want to be cold about it, but I say, you realize somebody is going to look at that for 3 to 4 seconds and throw it in the trash.
And you have
And
to be
you
happy.
just spent a month putting it together, you know?
You have to be happy with that, because that's the reality of it. That's the reality of it. And a lot of that, change is hard for a lot of people. It's hard for me. When you get a system down, and this is another thing in the sense of helping, and what we do in coaching is the marketing element of it. Agents feel in certain respects that like I paid for my magazine thing to go out, or my other thing to go out, and therefore I did my duty this month, when actually getting where that is, that actually getting out to people who are actually going to buy and sell with you. And that's the nitty gritty, that when you're going 1,000 miles an hour, you're just going to pay it. Or I know a lot of people who do, because the business is out there. I'm touching people. And,
Mhm.
I had one of the first brokers I had was like, you'd be surprised at teams that do a lot at how much they actually spend. That once their takeaway is not what you're probably looking at and being like, oh my gosh, look at the inventory they've sold over this year. And so it's I think a bit of it, and what you and I talk about a lot, is getting it to a level of professionalism where it's like a genuine company that is, I don't want to say like stock kind of, has investors and whatnot, but you're doing stuff with the understanding of like there's repercussions if you're spending this. You're throwing away money. And so I see like the phase of like real estate, those are going to do really well, are going to have that ability to kind of make it a true um profession on that business level,
Mhm.
versus with all the changes in the last year, for like buyer brokerage and so on, where it's like part-time people is gonna have a hard time in the business.
Yeah, that's the perfect segue into my next question here, which, you had said this is a hard business, and it is. And I started at 17, I was scouting properties for a developer. I was licensed at 18. I was off to the races many years ago. And it's an unforgiving, very difficult business that requires a lot of time, effort, work, and consistency. So, yes, part time agents, good luck, and we've seen a lot of them come and go. What advice would you give to agents who want to grow their business in this market, whether they're new or experienced? What advice would you give them?
What I would give them is find out something that has you interacting with people in a way that you really like and find rewarding. And when I don't mean rewarding, it's not like for you. It's more like this is something that like I feel like I'm helping people. And this is where, I'm not, there's so many situations where it's like door knock or do cold calling, and people feel awful after doing it. And so if you're able to find a thing that you're very good at and then you feel good after doing it, and it's not a negotiation with yourself to get out there and do it, then
Mhm.
stick with that and see where that goes with it. Because that's something, there's going to be a swath of things you could do. The digitize, like for having a business, 14 years in it, a legacy business, a a team. There's different avenues and ways of, my stuff's been going out for a very long time. You know, I'll say my name and somebody will be like, I read your article or whatnot. And so there's natural starters. And a lot of it's getting out there with people and then having conversations that build trust, because this is a trust business. A lot of the jokes and culture about real estate is about the classic salesperson and whatnot. And a lot of that is kind of the people who sell the most are trust agents. And it's going to make life, you know, in the business better for those who find the avenue to get to that level in that place.
I love that. When I was 18 and I had just received my real estate license, my first broker, day one, sits me down and he says, Mark, those who have long established, successful careers in real estate have integrity. And that means that if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know, but I would love to find out. The minute you start making things up and BSing, there goes your reputation. And I think that is just a, timeless classic there that everybody should keep in mind of you're not going to be the expert in all things. And, folks starting out see the most successful and they think, oh my goodness, or they start comparing themselves and they don't think about how much time and effort and work it's taken to have gotten to that place. Now, life, as I said, can be lifey, and there's always tougher seasons and challenging moments, and things happen. What keeps you motivated or grounded or disciplined during those tougher seasons or challenging moments?
I'm in a process now of kind of expanding the business with you in a way that is going to broaden it, and we're basically modernizing in a tech way that is just, it's on the edge of the business. It's not doing the repetitive things over and over again. It's when we were talking about how, if you get super busy, you're going to do the same thing. You'll wake up and it's a year and a half later. It's the best way to help clients. It's to do it in a way that allows me to balance my life. I'm going to be getting married next year. And so I'm in this process of balancing the work in a way where I'm able to service my clients, but then also give attention to personal life that I haven't necessarily done in the past. And so, but that also makes it a richer process for my clients because I'm able to be like, well, I understand that situation of trying to do this or the kids going to school, and this is how close you are, how far away you need to be. And so I'm excited for it. It's also when stuff does go like south in the sense of like activity, and like everybody locks up and they don't want to do anything. I know from experience in the sense of, the amount of reserves needed for a real estate professional. You and I talk about this pretty extensively of building up, where you're comfortable on the marketing, on the money. And so that, life circumstances happen. It's not, and you and I, we've talked about this before of where, you know, people do well and they overextend themselves. And then things go south. And, those things affect the real estate industries too. And so I would say that's kind of my takeaway from the last 14 years is the knowledge that I've done has calmed me on how to do this business because you're going to get excited. Part of this, everything you and I talk about is, getting ready. Once you like for the new agent, they start the transaction is where the real stress of like, oh, you have to make a decision within 5 hours of it. And a lot of people spend all this time with the marketing, doing all this stuff. The real business of service is we're negotiators for our clients. They're going to have to make a life decision sometimes within 5 hours when you get that counter back. And it's being cool under that. Now, I'm not going to compare our experience to like Ulysses S. Grant. But one of the things I was listening to was that, like in the Civil War thing by Ken Burns, he's mentioned the Ulysses S. Grant had 4 a.m. courage. It's where if something happens at 4 a.m., you'll be able to wake up with a clear head, make a calm decision instead of doing something erratic. In real estate, you're not going to have a 4 a.m. decision, hopefully. Hopefully, you turn off your phone, but you very well might have a 6 a.m. thing where you get something back, or you have somebody that says, I have to get out of this contract. And that's where we're servicing our clients and having that experience. And but a lot of people don't realize all the stuff in the back room that gets done in order to put the bow on it and provide that key or sell that house so people can move to their next place and enjoy their lives.
Yeah, I will tell you, I once heard it put, "Don't breathe oxygen into the fire in a transaction crisis," right? If your clients are stressed and emotional, don't come at them with more stress and emotion and just get everybody more riled up. And I always think about when I was 17, I was at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University training to be a pilot, and I got my pilot license. And I remember being told, if something goes wrong in the cockpit, you need to stay calm because you're the pilot. And if you freak out, how do you think that's going to go for everybody else? I've carried that with me my entire life, where regardless of whether you're flying in an airplane or not, remain calm
Mhm.
and be the one that is steady for everybody else because you can't think through solutions if you're panicking. Right, and to be very emotional, so staying calm is huge. I love that 4 AM courage, I had not heard that before. So one last question, and I always like to ask everybody this, but if you could go back and talk to yourself in your very first year of real estate, what would you say to yourself?
What would I say to myself? Think of the broad opportunities that's available that's just not within, the transaction of doing sales. Because you're going to have the ability to, you're going to meet contractors. You could get houses yourself. You could fix those houses. You're going to have every aspect of real estate at your fingertips and to not limit yourself. It's a knowledge business. It takes time to know that knowledge. And there's going to be a lot of people you meet along the way. And the past clients become friends. And they have, in the sense of you're just going to have opportunities. One of the things with real estate is that you have to be a people person. And you and I know that in the sense of interaction with people, and you have to be calm. And so, you're going to meet a lot of people. It's a very rewarding business if you know how to manage it and you know how to spend your time and not stress yourself out. Because a lot of people can get stressed out with this job. Well, I would say look for the opportunities and always keep your eyes open. And it could get to a place where you're helping people all the time, and that's the reward. You realize you sell their house that they've been in for 50 years, and it's the family house. Like all the children are there. They grew up there. They had rooms, and you're helping them to the next phase. And so if you're able to be happy with that being the goal, then it's going to be a very and not get lost, because a lot of the stuff that's talked about as real estate is a cutthroat, which it is. And you're going to meet a lot of people, because whenever there's a big money transaction, you're going to meet people of all different walks of life. But you're also going to know who are the people and what are the relationships you really nurture to get you through life and to really make this a great career.
Fantastic. Joe, I just want to say thank you. I know you're busy. I really want to say thank you for making the time to be here today. It's a privilege walking this path with you and, watching you evolve and everything that you're doing. So kudos, man, and thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, Mark. It's always great talking to you and kind of going over the industry, the business, and what the future is looking like. I'm very excited.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, take care.